Very nice to see you all. Thank you for coming, and hello everybody online as well. Um, yes, so I am Kat Austen. I'm a person. I make I make things. And if we could start the slides, I will say thank you all for coming to a talk which I very tongue-in-cheek called Really Interesting. I'm going to be talking to you today about how I come to be sitting here in front of you, which is a great privilege. And the reason that I have done all the things that I've done is because I'm motivated to try to understand my relationship with the world as a human being. And what I look into with all of my work, yeah, are the things that I find really interesting. So I find myself when I talk to people often breaking in the middle of a sentence and saying, "Oh, it's really interesting, right? Because blah, 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 blah." Right. So I'm going to be talking about all of the things that make me that kind of enthusiastic and curious. What I do now is I make installations and performances that are based on artistic research. This is one of the installations, and the next slide is one of the performances. And this is the kind of thing that I do. And I'm going to take you on a little journey through where I started with this motivation of mine, which has been unchanging since childhood. Um, in fact, am proud to say that I went on my first protest march when I was 2 years old in a pram, and it didn't stop from there. So I've been a bit kind of keen on the environment for a long time. I got here in a kind of roundabout way when you look at it from the outside. I started out, in fact, as a scientist, and I got a PhD in environmental chemistry, and I got a postdoc at the University of Cambridge in the Department of Earth Sciences. And you can see me enjoying Cambridge life. And I was researching environmental pollution at the Department of Earth Sciences. And this is next door, you can see me on a protest march against the introduction of ID cards in the UK at around about the same time. And I had always wanted to have this job, right? I wanted to be a scientist and an expert, and I wanted to work at Cambridge. And I got there and it was great. And then I realized I wasn't happy. I was fulfilling the kind of motivation of what I wanted to do. I felt it was my social responsibility. If I was able to do this job, then I should be doing it. But I realized that actually I was not enthusiastic about the day-to-day work that I was doing, and that I was taking up space in a position that somebody who was more excited about the work could do a better job, because they might discover things that I wasn't going to discover. So during my time at Cambridge, I started training in art, in mixed media and kinetic art. And when I left, I was lucky enough to get a commission from a gallery to make a sculpture. And I sort of took myself off to Wales, to the middle of the countryside, to make this sculpture, thinking, oh, well, great. All right. Don't know what I'm going to do after that. Um, and while I was there, I got a telephone call that I wasn't expecting. And it turned out that I had applied for a job at New Scientist magazine, which is a popular science magazine in the UK. I'd forgotten I'd applied because I was too excited about the commission for the sculpture. And they invited me in for interview. And they gave me the job because on the way out of the door, they said, "What are you doing now?" And I said, "Oh, I'm in Wales making a sculpture." And the editor in chief later told me that that was when he decided to hire me. I took the job and I worked up my studio practice while I was working as the editor in New Scientist, and I was the editor of the arts section in New Scientist, which was great, a great position. I dropped down to part-time when my practice started taking off, and after 5 years, oh yes, so that's the other picture that yes, I'm wearing the same cap, but it's later on, and I'm in Russia on a press trip where I got to visit the facility where they made the world's heaviest element. And I also visited a researcher who was like mapping brainwaves to behavior. And for the second interview, somebody from the government came and joined, and I wasn't alone after that for the rest of the trip. After 5 years, I left and I moved to Berlin and I set up my studio and sort of really started making work full time after that. After a few years, I was lucky enough to get a residency with the Scott Polar Research Institute, going to the Arctic to explore how one can engender empathy with an ecosystem under climate change. So I had previously been making work motivated by this question, and this is looking back probably a bit of a personal thing as well, because I had left science and I was very interested in how we had an awful lot of data and an awful lot of technologies that would address the climate crisis, but they were not being enacted. And that's both on an individual scale and on a policy scale. And at this point in 2017, when I went to the Arctic, it was a point where we were about to cross tipping points and things could have been done. And I was feeling very infuriated about the fact that there was so much inertia. And these changes were not being made. And so my question to myself was, when we know all of this stuff that we already know, what is it that we need to know, and how do we need to know it in order to actually take action? And I had been exploring the role of empathy in terms of generating these kinds of actions. And I'd previously made a work called the Coral Empathy Device. And for the matter of the soul, I wanted to move beyond trying to empathize with a non-human species to empathizing with an entire ecosystem. And this is quite an undertaking, right? So I decided to focus instead of on the whole ecosystem, which would be a little bit too much for me, to focus on the process of dispersal in the ecosystem, looking at dispersal from the perspective of water, moving from ice to seawater, and the dispersal of peoples moving in and out of regions, and also the dispersal of artifacts online and the artwork itself. So I carried out field recordings. I also made instruments for this residency, which measured the chemical and physical properties of water. They're scientific instruments that do this, and then I hacked them using a process called circuit bending, which allowed me to take the sound out of these scientific instruments and use them in my compositions. And so from this research in the Arctic, I was also lucky enough to get a fellowship at the University of Leeds as a cultural fellow in climate change. And I made this installation work, The Matter of the Soul, which orients around a 1-hour symphony that I composed for electronic instruments. And it uses my hacked instruments along with synthesizers and traditional instruments like the piano and voice. It also uses excerpts from interviews, which I carried out when I was in the Arctic, talking to people about their relationship to the land. And it's in 4 movements. And the 4 movements are structured around the process of dispersal of two bodies sitting alongside each other and beginning to mix in the second movement, and then mixing to make something new in the third movement, with the fourth movement as a rondo, so following a traditional symphonic structure. And this is a sculptural installation and also a video installation. So there's a 1 hour long video that accompanies the sculptural installation. And that video also forms part of a live performance. In the live performance, I play water from the Arctic with my hacked instruments, and I also play local water. And by mixing them and changing the chemical properties, I change the sounds that come out of the instruments live. So the performances are always carried out in collaboration with different collaborators. Here you see me performing at COP24, which was in Katowice in Poland in 2018. And I'm collaborating with Kasia Wojtek, a fantastic choreographer, and two dancers. And every time the performance happens, I collaborate with different people so that the identity of the performance also changes, as well as the identity of the water changing throughout the composition. Identity is really at a key focal point, and landscape identity is a key focal point for these researches that I do to make these works. And another example of that is This Land Is Not Mine. This was also the product of a fellowship, this time at the Institute for Advanced Sustainability Studies, now known as the Research Institute for Sustainability, Helmholtz Institute, Potsdam. They're really good with the catchy names. This work is about another region going through transition, the region of Lusatia in the German, Polish, and Czech border region. Now, after composing The Matter of the Soul, and then performing it a lot, I realized I had started to work through some of the emotional, ecological grief that I had been feeling in making the work. And I was interested to follow that emotion and to start thinking about what comes after. So, this is like 2018 passed, the IPCC climate change report had come out, nothing had changed. And I thought, okay, but, the world is still continuing. So where do we go next? And I wanted to think about what happens when we finally wake up. And so I started to focus on the idea of remediation. And the landscape of Lusatia is a very interesting place to think about remediation, because it's currently going through a process of structural changes where open cast mining to gather brown coal, so this is pit mining is another name for it, where very large pits are dug out of the ground to get this lignite out of the ground. That's been happening since the 1890s, but really kind of ramped up in the post Second World War periods. And now those mines, or at the time, those mines had been scheduled for closure by 2038. So this is super interesting landscape in which to look at post-extractivist practices and consequences to a landscape. It also has, as the Arctic does, an indigenous population with a regional identity that transcends national borders. This Western Slavic minority group are called the Sorbs, and their land has been, or their villages have been disproportionately affected by open cast mining in the region, where there was enforced relocation to cities from Sorbian villages in Lusatia since the 1940s. And the villages that were emptied were then completely destroyed in order to access the coal underneath. And there's a saying in Lusatia, in Sorbian, that God made Lusatia and the devil put the coal under it. I did 2 years of research in the region looking at recovery in this extractivist region. And one of the things that's happening when the mines close down is that they get flooded with water. So you'll see that on the right-hand side of the screen. And the water is very polluted, which you see on the left-hand side of the screen. So raw Wasser is like raw, untreated water, and Klärwasser is the treated water. And so when the water is flooded in, you get mine tailings, which is leachates from the mines, right? It's funnily enough, right? I used to model water when I was a researcher, and I used to model mine tailings when I was a researcher in science. Now, there are methods by which one can remediate that water. But when the mining happens, all of the groundwater has to be pumped out of the landscape, right? And what's really interesting, I think we should have make a bet with yourself how many times I'm going to say it. What's really interesting about that is that when the land is then flooded to make these lakes, it's so destabilized in the banks that people can't step on it. So these bank sides of what are meant to be recreational lakes are inaccessible to humans because of the instability and the likelihood of landslides, which means that there are small scale recoveries that you wouldn't expect. So the ecosystem starts to recover because it's untouched by human activity. It's not farmed like a lot of the other landscape around. And in this region, there's been the resurgence of an extremely rare endangered species of spider in these untouched areas. So This Land Is Not Mine is a 20-channel video installation which runs on a 14-minute loop where narratives emerge through individual videos, but also organized in a triptych that are kind of clusters of different aspects of regional identity. And then a narrative comes through the entire piece as well. And it has an interactive soundscape. So depending on how you orient yourself around those videos, the soundscape subtly changes. And I created these vignettes for the reason that it was very difficult to create something that could cover this whole regional identity under change, right? So what the videos do is to show you different windows onto aspects of the identity of the region and the multifaceted nature of that changing identity. I also wrote a 7-track album out of the research for the work, which is the performance that accompanies the installation. And they're quite diverse tracks. A lot of them are based on field recordings and traditional instruments with some voice. They include recordings taken by members of the community of residents who live in the region. This was carried out during Corona, and I wasn't able to run workshops as I normally would have in the region to do listening exercises and field recording exercises. So I developed an online crowdsourcing platform where community members could upload sounds that they felt identified the kind of characteristics of the region. And those are part of the compositions as well. And there's this one vocal track, which is an a cappella track, which you see me performing here at Ars Electronica. And this track is based around the melodies that are often prevalent in Sorbian folk songs. And then going on to a different form of kind of understanding remediation. This is remediation across bodily boundaries. At the same time as making This Land Is Not Mine, I got an Imapi Mare residency to make the Stranger to the Trees project, which looks at microplastics and their coexistence with trees in forests. So I've been working on microplastics since 2014. And I'd been mostly doing it in the context of running workshops using DIY science methods to identify microplastics in environments. And it was very clear that when workshop participants discovered microplastic with their own eyes, they were horrified, right? And I wanted to move beyond that horror because we're not going to get it back. Like it's there, it's in all our bodies already, it's in the world, it's in the bodies of other beings as well. And I wanted to understand how it affected the bodies of others from a more than human perspective. And so I decided to look at trees, which have a longer lifespan than humans, and to look at how microplastics entangle with trees. So I carried out a lot of research and made this very lovely installation, which is a 2-channel video installation with an interactive soundscape, which responds to your response to the tree sculpture in the middle. And what you see inside the tree is microplastic containing fluid, which fluoresces under UV light. It was that fluorescence that I used to identify actually what happens to the microplastics when it encounters a tree. So you can do a type of spectroscopy, which allows you to trace fluorescent entities. And I collaborated with these 3 scientists to make my artistic research rigorous enough to then publish as the scientific article, because I had a feeling that we would discover something that hadn't been shown before. And we did. This is the first paper that shows that microplastic moves from soil into tree roots and into trees' bodies. Moving on, I wanted to talk about how to touch a dragonfly. So carrying on with this theme of more than human perspectives, I was field recording for another project for Stranger to the Trees, in fact, on the Berlin Wall route, it used to be where the wall is and is now like a recreational cycling and walking route around Berlin. And I was out listening to the trees, and a dragonfly flew past my directional microphone. And the sound, I don't know if you've really listened to the sound of dragonflies' wings, and it's beautiful. And I was transfixed. And I'd also been making silhouette animation, handmade silhouette animation for Stranger to the Trees, which is one of the videos. And I find it so beautiful. I've been constantly inspired by Lotte Reiniger since I first saw silhouette animation when I was quite young. And I think it's a really beautiful kind of expression to highlight the beauty of something. And I wanted to make a work that looked at dragonflies and used this kind of silhouette animation. I was also aware that dragonflies have been utilized to show humans whether a landscape is polluted or not. So dragonfly population numbers normally is an indicator of the ecosystem health. And that's a scientific kind of way to look at it. And I felt that was slightly unfair because actually what it means is that what we're doing to the landscape makes it unlivable for dragonflies, right? That's the other way of looking at it. And so I wanted to make a work which took the perspective of the dragonfly and looks at how habitable landscapes are, and in the context of climate change and in terms of agricultural practices. And so I made How to Touch a Dragonfly, which is a 4-meter dome which acts as a screen. And it plays a video, a 360 video that's taken from the perspectives of dragonflies. And it's based on the structure of a dragonfly's eye. So you'll see this kind of rounded shape. So dragonflies have almost 360 vision, and they have hexagonal compound lenses in their eyes. There are 2,100 different hexagons in the How to Touch a Dragonfly dome, which is considerably fewer than in a dragonfly's eye, but there have to be some practicalities in making something like this. What it does is it immerses you into this other kind of feeling of other perspective. It really feels like when you go in, you're kind of entering a portal. And because the interior is made from hanji, you kind of feel like you're in a cocoon. There's a spatialized soundscape inside as well. And it includes interviews with people working in the UN Food and Agricultural Organization designated GIAS, which is a globally important agricultural heritage site in Cheongsan-do, which is just south of Wando. And this is an area where farming practices haven't changed for 400 years, which means that we can look at dragonfly populations changing that are a consequence of the shifting climatic region that is the subtropical region starting to move up into the Korean Peninsula due to climate change. And there's a sister project called Wingnets, which takes these hexagons. So each hexagon in the dome is a pixel, and it's video mapped onto the dome. And wingnets are individual pixels using silhouettes from parts of dragonfly anatomies, which play sounds from different dragonfly habitats that I've researched in around the world. And these are accompanied by photographs showing the dragonfly habitats. So they come as pairs. And we can play the wingnets video now. So after doing How to Touch a Dragonfly, I was super interested in this topic of biodiversity. And I was really interested in the concurrent expansion of digital objects, particularly in light of generative AI. And I was thinking about aesthetics, and I was also going often and some of the people here have come with me to Bogwangdong to make field recordings of the changing soundscape in Bogwangdong as the area gets closed down for redevelopment, right? And I was thinking also about the changing aesthetics of cities and this kind of and globalization and the collapse of visual diversity also. And I was approached to make a performance for Kiev last year. And I decided I wanted to make a work about that. And so I created Empty Fields, which is a choreographic performance, for which I use wearable controllers to control the sound as I'm performing. And so I wear the entire rig in my body so that I'm completely mobile in this performance. And you can see here the speakers on the side. So this incredible garment was designed by Violaine, who is with us today, and Lindy Main Studio. And we'll see more from their collection later on. But at the moment, here's the video for Empty Fields. Just to explain where the AI comes in an Empty Field. So I use field recordings as the basis, and then I use an AI to augment those field recordings into something that sounds more like music. And the whole performance plays with the aesthetics of this kind of changing aesthetics from the offline to the online and how that affects our tempos and daily life. And this kind of fascination with how AI is affecting our daily life is what led me into the next project that I want to tell you about, which is one of my most recent works, and this premiered in the summer in Galway International Arts Festival, and it's called Not Breaking, This Wave Drowns Hate. It is about our relationship to the ocean. And the research was conducted in Galway in Ireland over the course of the last year. And it looks at, for the installation and performance that I will be telling you about in a second, I created a bespoke AI and I created processes by which one can gather contributions for a visually oriented AI from community members, and then in an ethical way create a governance structure and a database through which an AI can be trained to come up with images. And then I implemented that into this installation to see if there was a way that the environmental cost of AI can be somewhat mitigated for by creating real world change in terms of our relationship to the environment. That was the kind of central proposition, and it addresses both the environmental and some of the social concerns about AI development. Alongside the AI, I made these bronze sculptures, which were cast using very old bronze casting techniques on site in Connemara. And these sculptures bring you through the installation space and are connected to sensors that work out where you are and what your interest is thematically. And this prompts the AI and the soundscape and also text on the screen to change in response to what you're interested in with regards to humans' relationships to the oceans. So I was also commissioned to turn this into a performance. And here you'll see another of Linda Main's wonderful garments. And this performance then, for this performance, my movements act as the prompt and interactivity substitute. So as I move on the stage, then this controls the outcome of what the audience is seeing. That was all what I've been doing. And I finally wanted to introduce my current work, which I just started this month. And it's called Thirst for Knowledge. So I'm super excited to be working on this project, and I'm doing it through the ACC Creative Programme in Gwangju, which is the National Asia Cultural Centre for people who aren't familiar. And I'm going to be creating an immersive sound work along with a publication that explores the entanglement of bodies of landscapes, humans, and AI data centers through water. And this is in the context of a proposed development in Jeollanam-do of Asia's largest data center. And I will be going and making field recordings and interviews on site at Jeollanam-do, and those will inform the composition and the publication for the ensuing artwork. So this will be premiering in November at the ACC at the end of November. I hope that you will all come and see it. I'm very excited about it. For that work, I'm commissioning texts from some leading artists and scholars and activists who look at questions around AI and water. And those texts will be in the publication as well as spoken in the soundscape. I finally wanted to end on another triptych of Cat in the Wild. So this is more how my days look now. So I'm still outside a lot, but now I perform and I spend a lot of time hacking and making and composing in the studio as well, following what I find is really interesting. So thank you very much for joining me. I hope that it was interesting for you as well.
Thank you very much. Now, we can open to the Q&A.